Corsair Clockworks, Chapter 2, in which Andrea is beset while on errand. Nicholas was always pleased to walk through the doors of Corsair Clockworks. His friend Adolfo would usually be busying himself on artistry in his workspace, while his rather regal and attractive wife would be manning the storefront. Always attired smartly in long dresses, always perfect posture, and always painfully constructed hair. She alone gave the shop of airs of being run by someone of much higher class than the Corsairs could ever claim. Seeing her would immediately cause Nicholas to smile, certainly not from any hopes of stealing her away from Adolfo, goodness no. Not only was he uninterested in doing so, he could tell it was impossible. The way she cared for her clothing, the precise details of her hair, these were all done purely for no one else in the world than her husband. Adolfo returned her affections with his own. Often Nicholas would spy a bit of jewelry shining about her neck, far too ornate for an artisan's wife to purchase, and so unlike the main income of his shop. It was often easy to forget Adolfo was also trained as a jeweler without such proof. That late afternoon Nicholas had stepped through the doors and met Elin Corsair's brown-eyed gaze immediately. He smiled brightly, brushing aside some of his thick, black hair from his deeply purple eyes. "And how lovely a sight to see this afternoon." "As you never neglect to remind me," Elin replied in the barest of ceremony. She still only barely tolerated him, and he found that delightful. Her politely concealed disdain for him, even knowing his rank in the baronial manor, produced images of thorny blossoms or vibrant, venomous moths. Such a perfect foil she was to her shy and apologetic husband. "Adolfo is in the back. Allow me a moment." "Of course," he said with a casual wave. As she exited through a door on the other side of the counter, he stroked his serpent familiar gently. He could feel Archibald was waking, perhaps noting the change in smells from outside, and slowly coiled his way around Nicholas's chest and moved in to take the new surroundings. Now, Nicholas cooed, "you know this place. This is nowhere new." Adolfo had entered the shop, smiling broadly, and the two had shook hands eagerly. A bit of catching up was in order, and they chatted briefly before Adolfo disappeared to bring the singing bird. Nicholas had spoken idly to Edelin, who carried the conversation out of dry politeness, even bringing up the weather. Oddly, Adolfo's oldest daughter Andrea appeared out of the back first, the girl looking as though the entire world had kicked her down. While she had shuffled to do cleaning on the other side of the shop, a deeply apologetic Adolfo had emerged to inform him that there were still snags in the bird's construction, when only the moment before he had been so happy of its near completion. Nicholas assured him out of another bout of stuttering, a terrible habit he would be damned if he didn't at least try to help Adolfo break, and then changed the subject by bringing up a commission he had personally made, a clock with a wooden base and visible innards under a glass dome. While the two talked about it and Adolfo produced the ornate timepiece from a high shelf behind the counter, Nicholas found himself glancing in Andrea's direction. A bit of harsh conversation passed between she and Edelin, and Nicholas actually held up a hand to quiet Adolfo. He watched the girl sluggishly exit the shop, and tilted his head to the side. He knew of Andrea, though he rarely spoke to her, so as not to seem as though his friendship with Adolfo had any other motivations. Edelin returned to the front desk, and glanced between the two men as she apparently noticed their talking had silenced. "Is there anything I can help you with, Magus?" she asked calmly, tight-lipped. He considered his words a moment, and idly placed a hand on Archibald, who was making his way around his shoulders. "Edelin, I couldn't help but overhear, and I know I have no place to say anything on how your family handles its affairs." "Goodness," she replied. "Then perhaps you shouldn't." Adolfo cleared his throat, painfully alerting Edelin that she was walking a thin tightrope of decorum. Nicholas half smiled and scratched at his eyebrow. "Perhaps, but you shouldn't be so hard on the girl for her eccentricities. Brilliance is often born from sideways thought." Decorum was gone. Edelin's shoulders straightened, and she looked to the side as she stiffly crossed her arms. "Does it? Brilliance, does you say?" Adolfo began tapping his fingertips on the table loudly. In my experience, Nicholas continued, and I'm aware it's largely being talented in magics that allows me to be as eccentric as I damn well please. And she is not, Edelin said icily, turning her eyes to him. Not to overstep before one under court employ. Edelin, her husband spoke up in a strong whisper. She ignored his warning. But it's best Andrea learn her place as a woman not blessed with high birth. Brilliance will be of no use to her. The Mechanists' Guild wouldn't even accept Adolfo. A woman has not even a suggestion of a chance. Adolfo, his rejection from the Mechanists' Guild a very old wound, said her name again, this time in a loud bark, causing a flinch from her. The exchange between the two was a shock to Nicholas. Never had he heard Adolfo raise his voice in such a fashion. That it was against his own wife, whom he thought of so highly, was even more startling. The corsairs stared into each other's eyes for a moment, and Nicholas was able to recollect his thoughts quickly. "You haven't spoken out of turn in the least, Edelin," he assured her, causing the couple to relax. Seeing his friend assert some kind of boorish house authority had been an unpleasant sight, and he was grateful to see it end wordlessly. "Thankfully," he continued smoothly, "I appreciate brilliance, and I'm not the only one who does. Had I brushed off your husband's work as the mechanists did, I would have failed to see how much of a genius he truly is." His words caused their faces to shift from tenseness to surprised awe. He smiled largely and finished, "I only say not to make their mistake with any of your children, even a daughter." "My best to you, Mummy," Willie Gamwell, the paper seller, finished as he handed Andrea her change. He always smiled that way when mentioning her mother, tipping his hat and his brilliantly red beard curling with his expression. Yes, sir," she mumbled, still elsewhere. The market stalls were closing. Andrea had made it just in time to purchase a large, hefty roll of thin, brown paper. Her arms laden with as much as she could carry, she walked her way between the stalls. All around, the sounds of rustling canvas, clinking glass, clattering coinage, shouts and scuffling footfalls followed her until she was clear of the market streets. She wasn't really focused on her steps, taking her back toward the main squares, however. Her thoughts were on the events of the day, and especially her mother's words. Being a daughter wasn't a chore. Simply being a daughter was easy. It was everything else that came with the unfortunate circumstances of her birth. The sewing, the cooking, it was the dreadful classes on etiquette, the fact that she loved music boxes, but couldn't replicate the sound on an instrument or with her voice to save her life. It was the fact that the only things she seemed to be honestly good at were things that no daughter was meant for. Tallying numbers, accumulating oil stains under her fingernails, and getting Andrea froze in place, suddenly taking in her surroundings. This was not on her way home. The street was dimly lit by oil lamps, not mechanical ones. Moisture hung low and densely on the streets, and a scent of sour river fish and humidity lingered in the air. All around the sidewalks showed signs of disrepair, as did the ramshackle buildings around her. Loud, boisterous laughter and foul-mouthed conversation poured from the lit buildings and from the sloppily dressed residents. A woman in a deeply red dress stood under a street lamp, and two men, obviously dockhands, paused to make overly enthusiastic advances. A pub nearby had its doors open, and several men leaned on each other in the doorframe, thoroughly inebriated despite only the faintest of stars appearing in the darkening sky, marking the early hour. Getting herself lost. That was the other thing Andrea excelled at. She had no idea where she was, other than it was not a place for a lady like herself. Trying her best not to make her predicament obvious, she started walking again, throwing furtive glances around the street. A thick tobacco smell seemed to linger on every pedestrian she passed, along with some kind of gutter-brewed liquor. How did she manage this? How many times had she been with Mom at a market? How many times had she successfully made the trip herself? By the divine, what was she to do? She held the paper roll in a death grip, using its weight for comfort. She could only imagine the look on her face, despite her best efforts to remain calm. As she walked by a pub, a large man, broad-shouldered and leaning heavily against the wall, arched a fuzzy eyebrow at her. When he did, the pinkish, jagged scar that lined his face moved with it. She nearly yelped, but simply picked up her pace. And was she only imagining the footsteps that seemed to be keeping pace with her? Why was there a ragged, mangy dog sitting on the corner next to men playing dice, eyeing her as it loudly gnawed on a pork bone? Why was the gaunt man across the street clutching desperately to a metal urn, his formerly fine clothes soiled and tattered? And why did every turn she took only seem to bring her into worse and worse streets? It was getting darker by the moment, and her heart was pounding louder as it did. She was so utterly brainless. Her mother was right. A girl with common sense wouldn't have ended up like this. She was alone. "Miss?" The word caused her to nearly trip to the ground, she spun around so fast. The man who had addressed her laughed lightly and held up a hand reassuringly. Goodness, easy. Blankly she stared at him, piecing together that this man didn't belong here either. He was tall, his shoulders accentuated by the deep, scarlet coat with pristine white trim that he wore. His military-style, calf-high boots were well cared for, as were the patterned waistcoat and stainless cravat. He was clean-shaven, his young, square jaw immaculate, and his strawberry blonde hair well trimmed. At his side rested a dueling rapier, the sort of formality only the noble classes would keep up. Looking at her with his eyes, sparkling and shifting in the light between green and brown, there seemed to be recognition. "What are you doing out here, miss?" he continued, his voice soothing and gentle. I think I know you. Your father owns the clock store not far from Main Street, yes? A servant of my family is a fan of his work. Miss Corsair, is it?" Servant? He meant Nikolos. The fear from the previous moments drifted away in an instant, replaced by an awestruck glow. This was the son of the Baron, Alan Ventaris. She should have recognized the uniform of the Royal Order of Knights immediately. A girlish giddiness began to fill her. To think of her fortune, to be hopelessly lost one moment, and to be rescued by none other than the most eligible bachelor in St. Emile. Not only that, he knew of her. Andrea, if you please," she said airily, only distantly aware of her voice speaking. Adding a scowl to somewhere in the direction she came, Alan then turned back to her with a warm grin. "You looked so upset, I couldn't help but notice. Do you need help getting home, by any chance?" Her smile spread across her face, and shyly she looked to the ground. Yeah. She must have been blood red. She couldn't seem to get out a simple three-letter word. He chuckled at her reaction and held a hand out. "Very well. I can guide you. Miss Andrea," he added as he placed a hand on her shoulder and turned her toward an adjacent street. This simple touch only caused her blush to deepen vividly, and she clasped the paper roll against her. Inwardly, she screamed with delight. He noted the roll she held onto as they walked casually, and he motioned to it. "Doing errands, then?" "I can take that from you if it's heavy," he offered gallantly. No, it's fine, sir," she assured him, staring into his eyes. There were many things she would prefer him taking hold of over the paper, herself at the top of that list. A smile tugged at her lips as she imagined this perfect night tossing aside the roll and wrapping an arm around her shoulder. Oh no, how sudden it was for her, how unseemly it was in the middle of the street, but how stunned he would be to see such beauty in such a terrible place. "Sir," he repeated, looking upward with sudden solemnity in his expression. No need to address me by title. I'm not on duty. No cases to preside over so far from the courthouse," he added, strangely bitterly. This change in his tone caused her many fancies to subside. He was suddenly very real, with the sort of look she imagined she herself had worn much of that day. It was odd. "Sir?" Alan paused in mid-step, and his face softened. Seeing this second change caused Andrea to stop as well, and to follow his gaze to the sky. Then her jaw went slack. Against the deepening night sky filled with stars, its form lit by the city below, a shape gracefully flew overhead, a gorgeous, massive vessel swam through the air far above them. An airship. Much like sea ships, it sported wide canvas sails and was sizable enough to carry dozens of passengers and supplies. On the bottom of its keel were hefty, rotating cylinders, conductors for the apparatus that allowed flight. The ship was huge, Andrea noted. She could barely make out the forms of men in the rigging and the shapes of windows lining the sides in rows. Emblazoned in the imperial military colors of scarlet and white, it cut across the stars powerfully. "It's so beautiful," Andrea breathed out low. "An imperial troop carrier," Alan clarified. "A friend of mine is on that ship. That is why I was near the river docks." She almost wanted to tell Alan to quiet himself, that he was ruining the moment. She studied every single curve, ignoring the sails in favor of trying to discern the mechanical marvels of the lifting cylinders, or to find the propulsion units she had heard were necessary to give an airship its first push into the skies. "I shouldn't be in civil court, safe at home," Alan continued dryly. "I should have been on that ship. Any ship." "My brother is," Andrea whispered. She felt Alan's posture shift slightly beside her, and she went on. "My middle brother, Theo. He has been a soldier for 3 years now, but this is the first time he has been to war." His voice softened in sympathy. "He serves the Emperor. You must be proud." "More envious," she replied sullenly. "I'll never be able to stand on the deck of a flying ship." "I highly doubt he appreciates the honor." "True," Ellen noted. "The airships are only gunboats now. But surely the conflict in Suzdal-Nergavad won't last forever. When the anarchists are defeated, everyone will have the right to see the world from the sky." That was actually very reassuring. His words caused the redness to return to her cheeks. "And your brother will return home safely. Theodore Corsair, you said? When I am on the battlefield, I will make certain." Her blush changed to stunned awe. A smile returned to him, a gentle one that she felt herself fall deeply into. "Are we in agreement?" he said. In a tiny voice she answered, "Yes." There was a pause as they stared into each other's eyes, as Andrea dumbly tried to articulate something more meaningful above a simple yes. She wanted the moment to never end. "Watch out!" But end it must. Something hit Andrea, hard. The world tumbled around her, and she spilled onto the cobblestone without a single ounce of grace. Where the paper or her purse went was unclear. She could vaguely hear the contents clattering out onto stone. Her head spinning, she could make out a male voice, nothing like Alan's, murmur to her, "It's best you stay there a moment, miss." Blearily her consciousness began to return to her, and she pieced together a cloaked form kneeling above. A curtain of unkempt, brown hair fell over a youthful face of 17 or 18, his dull mahogany eyes focused on 2 more forms close by. Still feeling every corner of every stone she had become momentarily acquainted with, she shakily scooped her possessions back into her purse and glanced over her shoulder to see who else was nearing. While the young man over her draped in a formless navy cloak was unwelcome, the 2 men approaching were more so. Rude as it was to assume the worst in a man based on appearances, there was little noticeably respectable in either. The more lanky of the 2 had untrimmed sideburns and breathed raspily through stained, damaged teeth. Every bit of his drab clothing was worn, from his tattered boots to his patched coat and drooping, wide-brimmed hat. His compatriot was easily twice the first size, with hefty, calloused hands visible as he crossed his wide arms across his barrel chest. Neither were masters of shaving, though neither was the man kneeling beside Andrea, and atop the larger man's head was a bandana. A pirate. He must have been a pirate. Pirates wore such things, yes? Alan stepped beside the kneeling young man and the pile that was Andrea, then hooked a hand on his belt with a firm expression. "What is the meaning of this?" The smaller man pointed a long, scarred finger at the man in the cloak. "The little whelp ran off with me coin, he did." "Thought he could get away on them spindly legs," the second added in a low rumble, though looking up and down Alan. "Aye," the first agreed eagerly. "Then he takes off like a bird to gets away." "You liars!" the young man snapped, causing Andrea to start sharply. His face was hard for his age, with the look of someone desperate for too long. Heavy bags darkened under his eyes, and his gaze kept darting around. She also noted in his left hand he was clutching a long, slender stick, formed to fit his grip. He must have been a mage, though she had never actually seen a casting wand outside of street performances, not even on Nikolos. "You were trying to accost me, and when I flew to escape, you all but threw me." Devoid of sympathy for either side, Alan's face grew tense and his lips curled into a sneer. "It seems there is a disagreement. We can take this to the courthouse, since it is worth disrupting the peace over." Meaningfully, he moved his hand from his belt, brushing aside one side of his coat to reveal one of the more intimidating portions of his uniform, the 6-shot pistol only royal knights carried and his badge, the later emblazoned with the order sigil of a griffin battling a serpent. At this display, the bravado of the two older men drained away. The one in the hat clicked his tongue loudly. "Knight, eh? Take his side, then," the other grunted sourly, turning away. In his larger friend's shadow, the smaller man jammed his hands in his coat pockets and glared at the mage. "You just watch yourself, mucksnipe." As soon as the altercation appeared done, the activity in the streets resumed. As unimpressed onlookers went about their business, Alan turned to Andrea and offered his hands. "Here." Thank you," she stammered out, allowing him to help her get to her feet. She couldn't help but notice the other man, the cause of her temporary stay on the ground, had not offered the slightest politeness, nor seemed ready to offer apology as he dusted off his heavy cloak. He moved his hands deep into the garment, behind a large panel of fabric held by heavy clasps just below his high collar. When he did, he looked like only a living cape, topped by a nest of dark brown hair. Alan's eyes focused on the young man as Andrea straightened her skirts and glasses. She could feel much of her hair had fallen from its braids, and several strands refused to stay away from her eyes. After a moment of tense silence, the mage finally turned on Alan's judgmental gaze and snapped, "What? Would you care to tell me what all that was about?" he asked calmly. "Thank you, but no," he replied brashly, seemingly unconcerned with the strands of his own hair that dangled in front of his face. Very little of it wanted to stay in the tail that held it back. Maintaining perfect dignity, Alan raised his eyebrows subtly. "And why not?" From the inside of the draping cloth, the young man produced a heavy medallion, clasping it in his leather-gloved hand. Inscribed on its yellowish, polished surface was an open scroll, in the center a lit torch. "Because I'm on mission." Alan's brow raised further in surprise. "Ah, a journeyman of the Mages Guild," he noted. A soft huff shook his shoulders, and he motioned to the street, implying he would keep the mage no further. "I suppose it isn't my business, then." "You'd be right," the man said dourly. Politely, Alan nodded his head in a short bow. "Good luck, then." The cloaked figure turned sharply on his heels, and said no more before slinking off. Andrea added a final, angry glare to his exit, but was returned to Alan by his voice. "Are you unhurt, Miss Corsair?" She quickly spun back to him, and idly tried to adjust the collar of her green dress. I'm fine," she managed to push out. "Although I feel so silly beside you now that I look like I've laid in the street." "It's nothing worth fretting over," he reassured her. "It was my fault for not giving our surroundings more mind. I said I would escort you home," he sighed. "Although I suppose I shall have to apologize for bringing you home worse for wear." He hooked the sadly crinkled roll of paper under his arm. It looked much like Andrea imagined she did. "Thank you again," she blurted. He laughed. She swore her entire being melted when he did, and he smiled. She felt his fingers delicately take hold of the tips of hers, and he led her forward. Think nothing of it. With their hands touching, how could she possibly think nothing? As they restarted their walk, she could only think everything, and how finally luck was apologizing for that day.
Corsair Clockworks is an Ever Tomorrow production, plot by Jessie Lynn Jones and Marlon de Rivera, and written and performed by Jessie Lynn Jones. For more audio fiction, click the links and subscribe today so you'll always be ready for the next chapter.